What's happening, guys? JD at JD's Custom Buggies. So, wanted to let you know what's been going on here at the shop. The shop is a mess. The whole engine room is just disheveled and whatnot. After the last video with the that we did on the QMK motor, I really got to looking at it and wanted to try and make some things work. So, I like trying to figure things out. This took a little more effort than I thought. It wasn't as simple as I thought it was, but we ended up working it out, and took a little bit of I've had a lathe for a couple of years, barely used it. Ended up someone had come knocking on the door, a friend of mine wanted to part with it, and I'm like, you know what, I'll pick it up just for the heck of it. And it's basically sat in a corner unused, but we actually got to put the lathe into play on a few things. So this is our project QMK here. So I took the cases and cleaned them up a bit, took the whole motor apart. There's a lot of this motor was run hard and put away wet. They didn't send me any favor. It was like basically the only thing left of this thing that was any good is probably the cases. So I took the cases, I got them cleaned up because I wanted to go on a mission, and the mission was, is it possible, because I had made a comment, I believe in the last video, that this isn't far off from a normal GY6 crank, only because the bearings were the same. So I wanted to know if it was possible. Could this motor, you know, could a stroker motor or a stroker crank be made for this motor? So that was a mission that went on. So immediately I took some old cranks that I had and started pressing them apart. Make sure I ended up having an actual tool. I broke the tool. Had to order another tool, but I ended up having the tool in my engine tool drawer over there that pulls the gears off the cranks and whatnot. So we pulled the gears off. I want to see how all this works. So I figured, let's take a broke down crank and pull it apart. And so we pulled the gears off of it, worked on getting the bearings off, pressing them back on, all this go back together smooth, and it did. So it was like, all right, now we've experimented with piece of garbage crank. The next move. Well, the next move basically was, because this is like the 150 crank and has the step down instead of the taper for the kickstart, can this thing be, you know, cut down where we needed it to be as far as, you know, for the variator? Can we take a normal GY6 crank and actually make a QMK crank out of it? And if that was the case, then can we do it with a stroker? So I have some boxes here. The Banjing cranks. So I bought these from the same place, you know, the same company with the SSP-G stuff. The Banjing cranks are going out. They're not carrying them anymore. I had two left on the shelf. The new cranks that are coming in are really nice. In fact, I might grab a box and show you the crank, because it's a really nice crank. Yeah, new SSP-G 3.0 stroker cranks are made by TTMRC. You know, the drag specialty people. They look to have a forged rod instead of like a cast bearing rod. It's a very nice piece. So I had started ordering those in to get them in stock. I have yet to put them on the website because I want to sell these last two Banjings first, but now these Banjings have donated their lives to further science, I guess. So now this is the box, but this is not a Banjing crank. So what I did was, I figured, let me start with a cheaper stock crank first. So I took a stock crank out of inventory, and we worked on it, and have it all oiled up when I put it back in the box because I wanted it nice. So this had the bearing, didn't need to have the bearing pressed off. We pressed it off to put it in the lathe. But if you noticed, so this was a normal GY6 crank. It should be tapered. We have it cut, for the step down at the right measurement and whatnot. And I wanted to see if this would work. So this crank was actually in this motor before I, you know, put it together. Before that, I had, you know, I was almost wondered if, okay, if I stuck this in with the kickstart gear, I wasn't sure where the measurement was. So I actually stuck it in there. It fit fine. I put the kickstart gear on there, and it was like, yeah, this is way off. And I was taking these measurements. Okay, we got to lose the kickstart gear. And then I was going to make some other spacer. I was going to try and actually cut the kickstart gear down, use that as a spacer too, and then realize that, no, you can't have the kickstart gear in there at all. It's a step down, just like the Trailmaster 150 carbide, 150 hammerhead, 150 crank. It just needs to be a straight up step down. So once I got that all figured out and got the measurements done and whatnot, we put it in the lathe. We got it cut down and put it in the motor to see if everything lined up, and it did. Now this motor's not together. It's just basically everything's a dry fit, and I'll explain why. So get this back in the bag. My hands are all oily now. So this was experiment number 1. Once I saw we could do this with this, then there was no reason why we couldn't do it with the, kind of gave me the go ahead. Okay, we can take a stroker and try it. So we did take a Banjing stroker. That is what is sitting in here now. So this is the, Banjing 3.0 stroker, recut to the measurements of the stock crank as far as the variator and everything. As you can see, everything lines up. If you want to get a decent view at that. Everything lines up just as it should. So, really great success. Awesome. Now I have yet to run this motor because this motor isn't really put together yet. All I have going on right now is it's dry fit with the gasket, with the crank in there. I wanted to see how the variator lined up, and I want to get a jug on there, and this is why, because I had to see, am I using the stock 47 link length cam chain, or do I have to change this out for 48, or do I get away with, using a couple of extra gaskets for, to base it up, a little bit under the cylinder. And we'll get to that in a minute, because while we were there, I sat there and stared at the cam assembly. And if you might want to check the last video, because right now this is all together. So the cam assembly is one piece. We came to the conclusion, if you watch that video for review, when we tore apart the QMK, this cam assembly, as the cam is snap ringed into the assembly, and how you get to the snap ring is you have these bolts here that take off the cam gear. Still have yet to figure out, I can do it by looking. I'm assuming that top dead center is with that. If you notice, that side is just rounded and this side has a little point to it. So with this point up, the lobes are down. I assume that's how you figure out top dead center and then line these up with your head. Okay. I even called my guy a Trailmaster and he's not even sure. This thing is, is new to all these guys too, so they're not exactly, have a boatload of answers for me, because I have made a couple calls as I was tearing it apart and asking questions. So this is the stock cam. I came out of here. It was all tore up anyway. I had called for another cam, figured we'd insert it in here. I needed new rockers, and they were supposed to send me another cam. The cam that they sent me was a straight up 150 cam, so it wouldn't have worked anyway. So I got to staring at this. I'm like, let's tear this apart. We tore it apart. Notice that the bearings are 2 different sizes on this cam. On your normal GY6 cam, the bearings are the exact same size. We all know, like, if you look at the stock head, and just grab any old cam from up here, that'll work. So that's your normal type head. The bearings are the same size because the journals are the same size, and that's how that works. With this head, this hole, and then the cap goes on top. With this head, this whole bridge, top to bottom, is one piece with the cam. So I'm not even sure, because it's hard to get the parts for this right now. I'm a dealer and I'm having a hard time. Like, if I wanted these parts, they didn't have the bridge. That's why they're going to send me the cam. So I figured, okay, I got to figure out how to put the cam in there. I did. But apparently parts are hard to come by for these right now. Don't know why. You can only ask so many questions. So staring at it, I'm like, I wonder if I could put a performance cam in this thing. Now, it didn't look too tough. You know, it was like, okay, well, the bearing is a different size on the inside. So, okay, that was an issue. That means the gear's got to get pressed off. So, what ended up happening is the whole cam came apart. Both bearings, and the sprocket. Got to make sure the sprocket's lined up back, because if you ever want to make sure this is top dead center again and get it timed right, we had to mark the sprocket or whatnot so we could press it back on. Pop the inner larger bearing in, put the sprocket back on, put it back in, then realized that we can't put a snap ring in there. So it ended up we needed to take it all back apart again, put it in the lathe, cut it down, so the bearing would go a little further inboard, so we could put the snap ring back in and get it all together, make sure it was lined up right. It seems to be, as far as the dry fit goes, everything seems to be perfect. So what we're looking at, and this might be the first, potentially first, but this is going to be the first QMK that I know of that's stroked, has a performance cam in it, in its natural form. Okay. Now that I've got all this figured out, and I'll explain the whole thing with the gaskets and whatnot. Now that I got this all lined up and everything, that's why I put the jug and the head on. I want to figure out with the cam chain. Okay, so I built a couple strokers with the Banjings before, for customers, and went back and forth, which was a pain. Had to go back and forth with the cam chains because, I anticipated that I might have to space up the jug a little bit, which, I did. But then going back and forth with cam chains, stock cam chain for a GY645 links. I tried a 46. With the tensioner, it looked okay, but it still seemed a little loose. But my main concern was this: every time I back the motor up, because I tend to, when I'm putting motors together, I tend to roll them over by hand, either with the fan or sometimes I'll have a variator plate, just dry face, just sitting on my bench. So if I don't have the fan and flywheel on there when I'm doing stuff like this with the dry fit, I can kind of rotate the motor back and forth. Problem is, every time I rotated it backwards, it would jump time. Chain would skip back. Now, does the motor supposed to run over backwards? No, but motors do kick back. If it kicks back a little, and it's usually when you shut it off or go to try to start it once and it doesn't, sometimes they will spring back a little bit, and if that happened, the chain would jump time, and then the next time you try to turn a motor over, you probably drop a valve. So I didn't like that. So I ended up going with the 45 on all the customers' motors that I've sent out with a stroker in them, and ended up using like 3 base gaskets under there with the 45. Now the chain is tight, a little bit tight, but the chain is going to stretch over time. It's not going to get any tighter. It's only going to get looser. So after some runs on it, my theory was, and I confirmed it with I called one of my vendors, sells all this good stuff. I talked to one of their guys who's pretty technically proficient with these, and he's like, yeah, you're right. That's the way I would go. It's only going to tend to stretch before it gets tighter. So, like I said, I built 3 motors like that, sent them all 3 out, no issues. So I'm assuming that we have to go the same route with this. So, there are 3 base gaskets under here, and that gets my piston right about where I want it. As far as deck height and everything. I like to, like all my motors, I like there to be a hair of tolerance, because, when motors are turning over a lot of RPM or whatnot, even when you roll it over and you're looking at it by eye, there's still a little bit of flex in all these parts, a little bit of play. So, in a previous video, we had talked about, with like the Trailmaster crank, the internal reverse 150 motor cranks that come in Trailmasters, Hammerheads, Carbide, stuff like that. There's a hair more stroke on that, so it tends to disagree with like a drop-in kit. So I tend to double up on the base gasket to give it a little hair. And what I found on a few motors is that the piston will actually just come up and kiss the head a little bit. You don't feel it when you're rolling it over by hand, but when you run it, that's when you hear it. And it's usually when I hear it on the test stand, and that's how I kind of discovered that whole thing and started backwards engineering it and looking at the specs on this particular crank. So same thing. What I use is I'll take my thumbnail and drag it across the piston. If it catches the lip of the cylinder, that's good enough for me. If it's level with the cylinder, I get a little nervous about that. Everybody wants as much as they can get, but better safe than sorry. So that's where I'm at with this. I got that. I got the little bit of a lip sticking that my thumbnail catches it. The next step to this now is going to be take it all back apart and actually put it together for real. Get the gasket set and everything. Get this all off. Now that I know where I need to be with assembly, and then the next step from there is she is going to go on the stand if we're going to run it, and if she runs successfully, and once I do the math and figure out, between the part, the labor, and this and that, we will probably be offering like a service where, you send in your cam bridge, and we'll reinstall it with the performance cam of your choice. That we will have, these cranks available for sale, and what we'll use is the TTMRC cranks. We'll do the machine work and pop them out, and we'll probably make it a kit with somehow. Well, I thought it would have to be a kit. It might not have to be, because like I said, we use the same cam chain. In my mind at first I thought I was gonna, okay, if I sell the crank I gotta sell a cam chain with it, and this and that and the other thing. I'm gonna talk to the vendor, see if I can get extra base gaskets, QMK base gaskets alone. Otherwise you would have to buy like 3 head gasket sets that include the head and base gasket together, which is more parts and more money than, you're not talking a lot of money, but it's still, a head gasket, base gasket set for a QMK, I believe, is like somewhere around $10-12. So, that's $36. If we could just get the base gaskets by themselves, I think it, you keep the cost down on the whole project, But I'm excited about this. I can't wait to get this motor done and get it running. I'm really curious, and if this is the case, then it kind of levels the playing field as far as performance parts, especially with the Trailmaster model of the QMK, because all your clutching is the same as your GY6. So you can use the exact same clutching that you use, which basically plentiful amount of parts, performance parts. At this point, the main difference between this motor and the 150 motor that was previously in your Trailmasters would be just the stud spacing on this. Most people, the way I see it, my theory is that most people who had the 150, they were looking to put a 61 millimeter on it anyway. This already has a 61 millimeter. It leaves you 2 other things: stroker crank, camshaft, and then the option of porting and polishing, which we can do for you, or if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you could port and polish your own head. Exhaust pipes will be a little different. If you have a QMK, the exhaust pipe flange is clocked differently, so like your hammerhead pipe won't fit it, like a hammerhead performance pipe. So fortunately, as far as we go, we actually, if you let us know what buggy you have, we build the exhaust pipe to your buggy. So I actually have a QMK set up already, because I've made quite a few for customers where the exhaust flange is clocked differently. So this way you have an exact fitment. It's like a factory fit. So really stoked about this. So this will be like Project QMK here, and we'll go through the whole process of the assembly of the motor, and then we'll get it on a stand, we'll run it, and we'll all share that experience together. Hopefully everything's as kosher as I'd like it to be. But I am excited for this, because I kind of shied away from this whole motor for a long time. It's like, oh man, why did Trailmaster do that? I figure I had to dive into it head first just to figure it out and see what can be done. Trying to make an aftermarket for the non-existent aftermarket. So really pleased with the progress so far. We've been working on this for maybe like a week and a half. So that's not bad. And we actually had another project embedded with all this. So we'll get to that next. While we're on this whole subject, got this done, and it was like, well, it still bothered me that the 150 crank, like in MBX, we have a non-stroker rule, and that's the reason why is because if you had this motor, if you had the internal reverse 150 motor, you couldn't run a stroker crank, and I wanted a level playing field for everybody. So it wasn't fair that, if you had a normal, old school GY6 with no reverse on it, that you could get a stroker crank for, but if you had a brand new hammerhead and you want to come race with us or something, that you're racing you're outgunned. You know what I mean? So when we got this done, it really got me to thinking about why can't we do the 150 crank? And the 150 crank is quite a bit different. The main thing, and I know we've been through this before in other videos, I'm just going to go run over here and grab one. So the 150 crank, we have the step down just like the QMK crank. Obviously this is the OG, this is the one that was here first. But the other thing that made it different was you have these two different size bearings. Now on every other crank, like GY6 crank, this is the bearing on both sides, okay? This side has a bigger bearing, it's bigger, it's wider, and this is what's made to go in that case, all right? This crank is like a normal GY6 crank. It's got the same size bearing on both sides. So I figured, okay, why can't we just knock the cam gear off, knock the bearing off, stroker, cut it where we need it, slap the bearings back on. Not that easy. Ran into a bunch of problems, okay? The cam gear on this is different than a normal GY6 crank. Didn't have that problem with this crank, with the QMK crank, but with this one we did. And the reason for that is because they have a different cam gear on here because the bearing is wider. So if you just slapped a normal cam gear on there, it would knock the alignment off of your cam chain. So we had to work around that. And the other thing is that the bearing that this crank is made to accept this bearing here, whereas a normal GY6 crank, it did not. So we had to find a different bearing. I had that part licked, was able to track the bearing down, by dimensions, and found them in France. I looked all over the place, all kinds of bearing sites in the US, could not find this bearing with the dimensions that I needed to make this work. So hunted it down, found them in Europe. I ordered a bunch of them, couldn't wait to get it on. We pressed it on, and we got it. So in this box here, I will show you. So as far as I know, I know it's been attempted before, through reading in time and this and that and being around. I don't think it's been attempted successfully. And the only reason I know that is that one person who had an attempted motor, the motor came here and I had to redo it for him. I could not stroke it for him, but I told him I could fix the motor for him and ended up doing that. So I ended up getting to backwards engineer the work that was done before. I didn't really pay much attention to it because I've had this, that piece I'd had in my hands for, about, gotta be 4 or 5 years now. So, this crank here, as far as I know, side by side, everything lines up perfect. That's my different bearing. So this isn't even the same bearing that's on the stock one. It's a completely different bearing, like I said, that I had to track down in Europe. But so we got the bearing there, and we were able to fix our cam gear problem. I've contacted Trailmaster to see if I could just get the cam gear off this crank. Well, 2 problems with that. A, they told me, no, you have to buy the whole crank if you want the cam gear. And I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. The other thing is that this cam gear will not work on that crank. And it's because of the way that the dimensions that this crank is cut, it's specially made. They didn't take another crank and kind of remachine it like I am. So I had to come up with our own little solutions to those problems, and we did. So really happy. Everything lines up. We basically spec'd everything out with digital calipers and everything. Checked it twice, this, that, the other thing. And as far as I can tell, this is money right here. So it's on point. So this is a Banjing Trailmaster, or I forget what the actual, what is the number on this motor? Oh, it's not even on that one. But they're like, it's a JP 157 QMJ, whatever that comes in. It's your internal reverse motor that is in your Trailmasters. All your American Sportworks buggies, your Hammerhead GTSs. Not this particular one. I'm just banging on it. But this is the crank for that motor, and basically it's a 3.0 stroker. So this I already have arrangements. I actually have a customer's motor that I'm rebuilding now. We had a discussion. He's a regular customer of mine. I've done like 3 motors for him so far. Coincidentally, I got the motor in like last week, and I asked him, it needed a rebuild, and I asked him if he'd be interested in being a guinea pig and trying this out for me. So I'm going to install it in his motor, and the reason for that is, A, I don't have an internal reverse motor buggy laying around for me to go ahead and try that right now, and B, with everything else that's going on in life between getting the whole Tennessee project organized and whatnot, MBX just kicked off, I just have no time to test it. So my theory is this: I would love to see it up close and be able to observe things and whatnot, but if I hand this off to a customer who's a regular and he knows what he's getting, and I told him, I said, if we have any issues, let me know, send the motor back, we'll figure it out. But I figured I'd give it to somebody who's going to run it like they stole it, and this guy will. And this way, if there's, again, if there's any issues, I told him I have it covered, but he'll run it like he don't care, where I might run it a little different, this, that, but I need it field tested. So it's going to get field tested. So this motor, or this crank, is going in a customer's motor, getting sent out, and then this one I'll run here, and we'll come back with results, and I'll let you know. I will not consider selling any of this stuff or putting any of this stuff, making this available to anybody, unless I know 100% sure that it is as reliable as the parts that are being, bought and sold by everyone else. So once I'm sure of that, I will put stuff up on the website. I'll put links, this, that. Trust me, I will, I'll make it available to customers. I think this is a game changer for all these guys who have bought, and I was very disappointed that they went to this motor. But if this levels the playing field and makes it as, aftermarket rich as your normal 150, then, I'm glad we figured it out. If not, then I'll be back to the drawing board and we'll try and figure it out. But this is basically the seeds right here to see if it can be done and how she runs and how she performs. So I do have a test for this one. There's actually a friend of mine who bought a Blazer 200, same motor. So he was expressing that he'd like to make it out to an MBX race. He's a local guy here, so I told him I was working on this, and once I get it together, that we might slap it in there, and that'd be the race that he goes to hit, just to see how it holds its own with, like, with the race motors that we got. So maybe that will level the playing field for him, because he's bone stock right now. So we have plans. It's just hard to shoehorn all these plans in a little bit of time that I've got going on with how busy we are. So excited to share this with you. Like I said, once we get it all figured out and we know for a fact that this is gonna run, then we'll talk about making it available for folks. So I guess while we're at it, before we hang up, I'll tell you what. So just because I'm excited and it's a new product, and we'll kind of show you. And while we're on the subject of strokers, let me grab a box with the new cranks. Alright, so this is the 3.0 stroker that's new to us, and SSP-G is distributing it. It's made by TTMRC, the same company who's making the 232 kits for SSP-G. And basically this crank is about as good a quality as the 232 crank is. Really impressive. So once this goes into JD's Custom Buggies production or whatnot, this whole stroker crank idea, if it makes it that far, then this is the crank that it's going to come with. And I just wanted to show you. So this is our Banjing crank. Alright. And where the main difference is going to be, where the money's at here, because this is a slightly more expensive crank, is that is a nice forged machined rod. It's very nice. If you look, this was cast. You can see how rough it is and everything. And that's your normal rod. I mean, other than, you know, I can't guarantee, other than this is made in Taiwan instead of China, where all the good stuff comes from, it's still a cast rod. It's basically the same process that you get with the stock crank, where this is different. This is smooth all the way around. It's machined. It's not a cast unit. This should be a lot stronger. And just the quality of the work. I mean, all the way around, if you look. And Banjing's a good unit. This is just a step up. Now, the prices, I forget what the price is, because I haven't even put these, I just got these in. I haven't put them on a website yet. But the Banjing crank was $229, I believe, retail. This is probably going to be somewhere from $250 to $279. I got to look it up. Like I said, I was just excited to get them in, so I haven't had the chance. But that is a beautiful, as far as GY6 stuff goes, I mean, that's just beautiful workmanship. So, definitely different than anything else I see. But once this is available, this is the crank that you're going to get. Because these are getting phased out. They are phased out. They're my last two. And that this is what's going to be available to me to use. And I prefer the better quality, slightly more expensive unit. You know what I mean? Because I kind of built the whole idea or premise behind the shop and retailing parts, and I just want to carry the best parts that I can get. And I feel like right now this is like one of the best parts that I can get if this is, you know, where we're going with this. So this is a great crank. Look forward to using it. Gonna be nervous putting it on a lathe, but it is what it is. But definitely a step up. And like I said, Banjing is no slouch of a company. They make great product, but this is just like a step up. And it's just the nature of what it is, the nature of the beast. So that's what they're gonna look like when they come to you, if and when they come to you. So trying to put everything in my appropriate boxes because I have them all. Now in the meantime, I do have one available QMK stock crank here that was made here. I would probably put this in inventory as a QMK crank once I run this thing and I know that everything's good that way. I'm just trying not to miss a step. So anyway, that's where I'm at with this project right now. Hopefully it gives a little glimmer of hope to anybody who's got the QMK motor. And this is just cool. This is a whole thing. This is me, you know, going outside my wheelhouse here. I love building buggies all day long. I love building motors. This is just me trying to push the envelope and actually making, in some respect, making the parts or making them work, making them fit, going outside of, you know, like, you know, walking a tightrope with no net. So I'm excited to see how this stuff works out. But that's it for now. If you need parts, go to gotbuggies.com. If you like what you see, you like the channel, subscribe, hit the like button. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. And that's it till next time. Thanks a lot, guys. JD's out.